Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Hall Pass. My name is Reggie King, and here on Hall Pass, it's real stories, real teachers, and real talk. And this is our third episode, and we are sponsored in part by none other than nobody. We have no sponsors, so if anybody is interested, please reach out. This episode, I wanted to start with a question, to pose a question to the audience, and it's a question I also posed to myself. And that question is, what if your first day of school is your worst day of school? Now, many of you are heading back to school right now. Some of you might already be in school. Some of you are starting. Some of you are in pre-planning. And then we have some of our other schools that will start after the Labor Day weekend. And one of the best times of the year as an educator is that first day of school, right? It holds promise. It holds expectations of what can be. You're excited. I'm on social media. I'm seeing teachers decorating their classroom. And something new that I'm also noticing is the social media accounts of schools. I'm seeing TikToks. I'm seeing dances. Looks like a lot of fun. And I feel like I missed out on all of this. But that first day of school is coming up. And there's so much promise that it holds, right? And what if all of that comes crashing down on that first day? Now, we're going to talk about that. But before we talk about that, I had an interesting conversation at my former school the other day as I was picking up my kids. And one of the teachers there stopped me and said, Mr. King, I heard you have a podcast. And this caught me off guard because me and this teacher, we're not following each other on social media. And her question that froze me in my tracks was, so what is it about? And ever since I've started this Hall Pass, which I think was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, it's a question that comes up. And, what are you doing? What are you hoping to gain? What is the goal of this? And I can be 100% honest and say, I have absolutely no idea. This Hall Pass podcast, how all of this came about, during my 18 years of education, some of the many stories that, things that happened to me while I was in the classroom. And when I talk about education and when I talk about it, even today at my current job, I really do not think that there are that many careers out there that one person has so many different roles that they are asked to fulfill. Anytime I do try to think about, okay, what would you compare what an educator goes through? The two careers that I think of off top are a doctor or somebody working in the medical field, somebody in the hospital, and a police officer. And I say that, and some of you are probably like, well, how is that? How are those two things alike, or those three things alike? And for me, it's all of the different things you are asked to do, and you're making split-second decisions. And in the case of an educator, you're making split-second decisions, usually with a group of people, a large group of people, depending upon what grade you're teaching, what school you're at. I've taught in classrooms where I've had 20, 25, 30 students that you are responsible for. And you have things that happen. A day in the life of an educator can go anywhere from, you might be at one moment practicing for an active assailant drill, which when you think about it, how times have changed and how crazy this world is, that part of your day is spent training students on what to do if there is somebody within the school that has a gun, and you're coming up with all of these different escape routes and can't talk. That might be one part of your day. Then you're teaching curriculum. Then you might be breaking up a fight. Then you might have to do a device check on another student because they're on an inappropriate site. Then you might have to administer a test to all of those students, and that also might be on a computer. So now you have to have knowledge within that. You might have a student that is severely depressed. You might have a student that has certain accommodations. All of these different things happening all at the same time, and you're responsible. Not only that, You have the expectations set upon you by your administrators. No matter what, you have certain goals, you have certain marks that you need to reach with those students. Some of those students who might not even want to be in the school. You also have to deal with the personalities of the parents. You have a lot of parents who might be extremely hands-on. They want to know everything that's happening with their child. They want to be active. They want to participate. They want daily updates, and they want them now. On the other end of the spectrum, you might have some parents that you never see, that when you do have a problem with the child, it's very difficult to get in touch with them. So all of this is going on. All of this is happening on a day-to-day basis. And it's up to those educators, those teachers that are in the classroom to make the right decision. And for most of us, that decision is always do what's best for the child. Now, I don't sit here talking to everybody like I'm some type of teaching guru, because I am not. What I am is somebody that's had a lot of experience within the classroom, working with students, and even before I was in the classroom. And to me, teaching is like parenting. You are entrusted with these children every day, and you truly want the best for them, just like we do with all of our children. And these students, they will rise and fall to meet your expectations. You start to learn that what works for one student absolutely won't work for others. This is what our educators are going through. So again, what am I here doing? What is the goal of this? What do you hope to come out of these conversations with Hall Pass? Well, I'm hoping that these conversations can start to spark dialogue about something I truly love. Education has taken me places that I never thought I would go. Being a teacher, I've been able to impact the lives of many other students and hopefully some of the coworkers that I've had as well. It's a life-altering moment when you truly find out what your gift is, when you truly come to a realization of, okay, this is what I think I was placed upon this earth to do. And for me, it's working with children, it's working with teachers, it's being in the schools. And it pains me now to see the current state of education. We have transformational educators leaving the schools. Student violence is up, academic scores are down. And it seems like nothing changes. And so with this Hall Pass, with me doing these conversations, and my hope is to start talking to people in education. I want to talk to principals. I want to talk to district leaders. I want to talk to guidance counselors. I just want to have conversations where we can educate. I know a lot of times with situations that I faced, I was always looking for help. I was always looking for answers. And sometimes those were hard to come by. And I'm hoping that within this space, within this forum, we can help each other. One thing you'll notice about me is that I'm a big analogy guy and also a big comic book fan. And one of my favorite movies is Justice League. Now, some people like Justice League, some people didn't. Depends if you're a Marvel person or a DC person, but that's neither here nor there. But in the Justice League movie, there's a scene when the villain has finally encountered the members of the Justice League. You have Batman, you have Cyborg, you have Flash, you have Wonder Woman. And of all of these superheroes, Flash is the one who's the most uncertain about his particular powers. He doesn't really consider himself a superhero yet. He hasn't really done anything. And in that moment where the villain is attacking and there are the civilians that are in danger at that moment, he asks Batman, who in this movie is a grizzled veteran. He has been doing this for quite some time now. He's pretty much kind of towards the end. This isn't a new Batman. This is somebody that has been in Gotham and doing his thing for years. But he asks him what to do. And Batman says, save one. Flash is like, what do you mean? You're so fast. Get in there and save one of those. Okay, so what do I do after that? Then save another. And I like that quote because, again, that is what I'm hoping that this can do. I'm not sitting here thinking that I am going to change the world. This is me doing this all on my own. I'm not being forced. I'm doing it because, again, this is something that I truly love. But if what I talk about on here can impact one person, can open the eyes of somebody, that can be that moment that stops that teacher from quitting the profession because they've had a really hard day or they're dealt with a very difficult child, which we're about to talk about in just a moment. If I can save that one, then I can try and save another. So now let's talk about that first day of school that became the worst day of school. Now, back when I was teaching, I always had stories about school, but those were contained to my classroom. It wasn't until I became a behavior specialist that I was in charge of discipline for the entire school, and it really opened my eyes up to everything that I thought I knew and what I didn't know. And I think a lot of that time when I was teaching in the classroom, I was sheltered as to what was going on in the entire school. When you're on a grade level, you're in a silo. As a fifth grade teacher, I plan with fifth grade teachers. I ate lunch with fifth grade teachers. That was my community. You're always with them. So you don't really know about what's going on in the other classes and in the other grade levels. When I became a behavior specialist and also a dean and having exposure to all of the behaviors that go on in the school, it really started to open my eyes. The other thing that I think that I did not realize as a fifth grade teacher is that in an elementary setting, if you're K through 5, typically by the time a child reaches fifth grade, if it is a student that has been identified as having behavior disorders, if they are aggressive, if they are violent, typically what happens by the time they've reached fifth grade, that student has now had at least some type of services to get them either the help they need or to have them in a more appropriate placement. In a school setting, and this is going to be something you might want to jot down if you're not familiar with education, I taught at a time before there was inclusion under IDEA. So inclusion means that students that have been identified as having a disability are going to be in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. LRE is a legal requirement under the Individuals with Disabilities of Education Act, or IDEA. And it states that students with disabilities must be educated with non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate, ensuring that they are only removed to separate settings if their needs cannot be met, even with extra supports. What this means is that if with inclusion, before inclusion, you had students that had these behaviors, they were identified as having an disability, those students might have been taught in a separate setting. They might have been in a different classroom. One of the things I think that has changed is now with inclusion under IDEA, you now have a lot of students who are now in a general education setting. They're in a general education classroom, and those students do receive supports under IDEA. The challenge is those supports are not typically for an entire school day. And you run into students that have those extreme behaviors that struggle in an environment with a lot of other children, having the appropriate behaviors that are required in order to be successful within a classroom. And this is not to say that I am against inclusion, because one of the things we're going to talk about as we continue this series is, I think the question becomes to take a deeper look at it. Teaching in 2026 is not the same as teaching in 2006. It's probably not even the same as teaching in 2016. The classrooms are a lot different, and you've added extra students into the classroom with the teacher, and some of these students, their behaviors inhibit the rest of the classroom learning. Now, as I became a dean and behavior specialist, one of the things I noticed is that the behaviors I'm about to talk about, they would astound you. I remember, sharing, hey, this is what happened to me today. And people would ask me like, man, you must teach at a really, underserved school, or you must teach at a really bad school. And I would have to cut them off and say, no, my school is in a very, middle class, setting, here in Orlando, Florida. Like, their obvious thoughts was, you're teaching at, a ghetto school. Like, the first thing that comes to their mind is lean on me, which, funny enough, I definitely felt like Joe Clark walking into school each day. That was not it. This was elementary. And the behaviors I saw, students attacking students, students attacking teachers, saw students attacking pregnant teachers, saw students that spit, students that kicked, tearing up the class, runners. How many of you have a runner at your school? Meaning somebody that out of nowhere just bolts out the classroom, just takes off full speed. And you are responsible for that child. So hopefully you got your Nikes on and you can catch up with them. I've seen students hurdle 10-foot gates and make it off campus. I've seen students bring weapons to school. I've seen students bring drugs to school. All of this at an elementary level. So what this did to me was, I'm the kind of person that I always try to find the positive in everything. That's to avoid going crazy. I try to put a spin on it. And what I started to do as a release from some of the things that I was witnessing, I started documenting these stories on Facebook. And I began calling it Law and Order Elementary Division. I would even type the noise, the plung plung, to go with it. And I did this without thinking. And the purpose of it was never to make fun of the student. And in the story today, I want to preface all of this by saying that is not the goal of this. I went as far as to give them larger than life character names. I might use Tony Montana, or I might use Chucky, or I might use Freddy, or something like that. And the purpose of that was these students do start to take on a larger than life, like a larger than life being, because there's so much energy that goes into working with these students and trying to keep them in the classroom, trying to keep them in a general education setting. And it consumes your day, it consumes all of your energy. But the purpose is not to ridicule the student. It's never my intent with these stories. And the one today is not to embarrass, it's not to ridicule, it's not to humiliate. It was always then, and what it will be now, is to inform and shine a light on what we go through. I've shared these stories in the past. Some of the parents at my schools followed me, and I never had any issue with any parents. There was only one time that a parent did reach out and ask to have a story taken down, which, again, I always will change the names of details. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to change the name of some of the details, because I never want anybody to sit there and be able to say, oh, I know who that is. Now, some of the teachers I work with might know, because, again, we were all there. We all went through it. But it's not to do that. It's, again, I don't think a lot of people, and even when I started doing this, I don't think a lot of people understand how challenging our job is. Again, I compared it to a police officer or a doctor, and I know a lot of people are probably thinking, well, those deal in life and death. And does it get that extreme on a school level? Have I seen it get to that extremes? I will say no. But when you are in charge of protecting all of the students at your school, and you have students that are aggressive, either towards those students or towards people that can't defend themselves or can't protect themselves, that's when it would start to wear on me. So I want to tell you about a day that sticks out for me. It's the first day of school. Now, for me, the first day of school is excitement. As a dean, as a behavior specialist, I'm in charge of discipline. One of the first things I want to do on the first day of school is I want to start trying to make those connections. I want people to see me as a friend. I never wanted to be seen as, well, let me stop right there, because my nickname was also the Dean of Mean. But that was more so when I had to put that hat on, because I was one of those people, as far as with discipline, if I was coming to you and you did something good, we're going to celebrate you. I was on the news talking about you, our school news, anything I could do to uplift you, I'm going to do that. But at the same time, one of the things I talk about is I can be friendly, but I'm not your friend. When I do have to put that discipline hat on, I wanted students to know I'm going to be fair, but I'm going to follow the rule as far as, whatever your consequence should be. So with that being said, the first day is always a great day because typically there are not that many behaviors on the first day of school. For me, the first day of school, if anything, it's dealing with students and parents having separation anxiety. You have those students, particularly in our younger grades. You're talking about kindergarten or first grade. They're crying. They don't want to let go of their parents. But on this particular first day, it was different. So I was excited about this first day of school because it was my son's first day of school. And one of the benefits of working at a school and your children come to that school, they're kind of like celebrities. People already knew who my kids were before they came to the school, and it wasn't as great of an adjustment for them. But I was excited. Here I am, my second child, Jordan's getting ready for his first day of school. So my wife and we had made arrangements where I had to be at school first, and she would bring Jordan. And for our school, on the first day, and we're a smaller school, but on the first day of school, parents are allowed to walk their kindergartner students to the door. That's the one time we let parents, pretty much in to walk the halls, like during the school day. And it's a very special moment. You have a lot of parents, you take that first picture, you have the picture or the videos. Some of you have probably already done it now. You have that picture or video of dropping them off, seeing them walk inside the building. They wave to you. We take those first day of school pics. We're holding the signs. So we have done all of that. So I'm already at the school and I'm waiting for my son to arrive. So my walkie-talkie goes off. Mr. King, we need you in this kindergarten class. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, all right, I should have time. This is probably just a quick fix. I've got a student that's probably got some tears. I'll speak some words of encouragement, speak life into them, let the parents know that everything is going to be okay. And then I'm going to make my way to Jordan's class. I want to see him on that first day, give him a hug for his very first day of school. As I get to the kindergarten class and I walk in, something sticks out to me. I walk in the classroom and parents are in the classroom and they have a look on their faces. Now the class is perfectly silent. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear an ant pee. You can't hear anything, but parents are in there. There's tears coming out some of their eyes. They're crying. This is not the typical first day of school in the classroom environment that I'm used to. Yeah, we have tears. We even hold what's called the boohoo breakfast for those parents that after that first day of dropping off their kindergarten students, they can go and have some refreshments. But this wasn't that. So I'm looking at the parents and I look at the teacher and, without us talking, I'm like, giving him the what's going on. He looks at me and he points to this one student. The first thing that stuck out about this particular student was for a kindergarten student, this student was probably one of the biggest, and I don't mean in that way, but like you could tell this student was physically larger than most of the other kindergartners in that classroom. And so I see the student sitting there and I still haven't been able to connect the dots as to what is going on. So for me, my first thing to do is I always try to disarm the situation. So I sit next to the student. I'm looking at him. Nothing. Then the student finally looks up, and all of a sudden, loud as possible, he says, now, because this is a family show and I'm not want to put my career at risk, we're not going to say the word he said. Now, if you taught in elementary, yes, I've heard cuss words. I have never heard a cuss word in a kindergarten class at this volume. Whatever the volume you're listening to this now, turn it all the way up on your device. And even then you would need to turn it up more. And if you want to know what that cuss word is, again, this is a family show, so I can't go into the exact word. But since we are talking about elementary, this word rhymes with luck, tuck, suck, and most importantly, nuck if you buck. And so this student had been saying that word over and over again as these parents were walking their students in on the first day of school. I looked at the teacher. He looked in disbelief, and he looked at me and literally just said, "Yep." And this was the first day of school. I dropped my head knowing that I was not going to be able to see my son walk into his class on his first day. This became a situation that went on for quite some time. Now, for most schools, with your kindergarten students, you have a screening process. And during that screening process, as we were speaking earlier about IDEA, if you have students that have a disability and it's been identified, what they will look at is the proper placement for that student. So earlier we talked about least restrictive environment, and then you have more restrictive environment where that student will not be in a general education setting for the entirety of the day. Somewhere along the way with this particular student, they didn't go through the screening process. This student had autism spectrum disorder. This student was, as we found out later in the school year, extremely aggressive. Student was nonverbal, and it became an event where, when we talk about, what are those things that change how you feel about education, when we see teachers leaving the classroom, this was one that began to wear on me. So part of what you have to do as a behavior specialist is, when you do feel like you have found a student that has not been properly placed, you reach out. You have behavior analysts that you reach out to. But what happens is that when a student is placed, whether they're placed in a restrictive environment or the least restrictive, in order to change that student, no matter if it's a clear-cut case like this, and I get why, because if you look into the history of IDEA and look at why it was developed, it was to protect students with disabilities, because for a long time, students with disabilities that could be in a general education setting, that, if you think about autism spectrum disorder, it runs the gamut. Just because somebody has ASD does not mean that they can't be fully functioning in a general education classroom. Case in point, if you're familiar with Asperger's, which is a type of ASD, I had a student that had Asperger's once, and this student to this day, and I would love to look him up and see what he's doing right now. But when I say literal genius, and if you're not familiar with what Asperger's is, if you've ever seen, again, I'm a movie person, if you've seen the movie The Accountant with Ben Affleck, his character had Asperger's. So he was an accountant, impeccable with numbers. Like, this student could do the hardest math problems that you could think of without using a calculator. So again, when you look at that spectrum, you have students who can be fully functioning within a general education classroom. With certain students, the behavior can be so severe and so extreme, it becomes a challenge. And in order for you to change that student's placement, you have to go through a process of data collection that is very, very timely. And this led to, like I said, months of collecting data and trying to, as I said at the beginning, one, you want to do what's best for that student. But not only that student, you think about the rights of the students within the classroom, and you think about the teacher as well. And this was something that would go on and went on for quite some time. And there's more stories involving this particular student. Again, this opened my eyes as we talked about how it seems like things haven't changed and now some things need to change, because when I see the news and I see certain stories and I see, you seeing that there's a mass exodus of teachers leaving the profession, I don't think the context is always there as to why some of these educators are leaving and why they are no longer feeling appreciated or feeling safe in the classroom. I want to leave with opening up discussion. I would love to know if you've had a first day that's comparable to this. As I move forward with Hall Pass, I would love to talk more about these particular situations. And what are you seeing in your schools? What are you seeing in your classrooms? Have you dealt with something similar to this? And how did you persevere? Or how did you overcome? Or did you persevere? Did you overcome? Or is it something that's ongoing right now? I would love for these conversations again. Maybe it won't help you, but maybe it will inform or enlighten the next person. For those of you who have watched all this, I thank you for spending your time with me on Hall Pass, and I look forward to talking to you again. Be sure to follow me on our Facebook page, our Instagram page. You can watch this full video at the Hall Pass Podcast YouTube page. I'll talk to you soon.